Welcome, Henk, to another podcast. Today I want to talk about the change in IoT. Things are changing all the time. With Corona, a lot of things are changing as well. Some things are changing rapidly, others are going on a normal pace. IoT has certainly changed a lot. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about with your experience, because you've been involved with IoT for more than 30
years, yeah.
What are the biggest changes you have experienced with IoT?
Well, I think the biggest change is that IoT has changed from focus on point-to-point implementations to platform implementations. And with that I mean is that where IoT often, and it still is by the way, focuses on trying to solve one specific problem by, for example, connecting a number of storage tanks to the internet and then enabling a company to better manage those storage tanks, focuses it now more on we build a platform for a number of different applications or a number of different use cases, and we allow various companies to connect into that platform and we deliver all kinds of services. So that is more like a technology stack than a point-to-point solution.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the technology behind IoT, what are the biggest changes in terms of the technology over the years?
Well, I think there's changes in three areas, and those three areas drive the development of IoT and the progression of IoT. The first one is that the electronics that is used for the devices in IoT gets more and more powerful every year, pretty much a factor 100 every 10 years for the same footprint and the same cost. The second big change is the introduction of mobile networks, cellular networks. That opens the door to a lot more communication, and those networks change all the time. Now we're looking at 5G, more bandwidth, more ability to support IoT applications. So communication gets cheaper and cheaper, and then the third part is the processing of the data. So the data that's collected with IoT is more valuable because the technology to process that data is really developing very quickly with in areas such as machine learning and artificial intelligence. So those three technology changes drive IoT.
And that is maybe also a reason why IoT is becoming more and more popular, because it's getting more and more accessible for different companies, for different purposes. What have you noticed in terms of solutions or products where it is used?
Well, I think that that it's totally correct that IoT is getting more popular, significantly more popular. Even in the last few years, the interest has grown significantly. Cost is a very important reason. For the same cost, you can do a lot more, or you can say it another way, you can do the same for a lot lower cost picture than you could many years ago. What we also see is that up to a few years ago, IoT projects would start only if there was a very easy to understand use case and business case. So there was a certain problem or certain opportunity identified, and it was very easy to see, hey, if you start adding an IoT solution to it, you can immediately get a very high return on investment just for that single problem or that single project alone. What we now see is that people believe that with data collection you can generate value, and they ask a lot less about that specific use case and a lot more about, okay, how much data can I get and how easy can I get it in order to generate value that they may not even have identified yet, but they know is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people have grown to understand that data is it's not just data is becoming more and more interesting and valuable for companies.
Yes, and they recognize and they see the cases around them, they read about it, they hear success stories of companies that started going data-driven data-driven decision making rather than making decisions based on gut feel or experience or because of rule of thumb type of analysis. Now with real data and really knowing what is going on, you can take other decisions, and there are success stories of companies that that save significant costs, change business models, start offering new types of services or products because they have implemented this. And at the senior management level, people realize that and start asking questions, why are we not doing that yet? And so that's also driving IoT.
Yeah. And then they come to Evalan.
Yeah.
And because of all these innovation changes, cost reduction, a lot of solutions or implementations have also changed, I think, for Evalan as well. What have you noticed in terms of what has changed for Evalan or for the implementation?
Now, I think Evalan has changed in the sense that we follow this trend. So what hasn't changed, maybe to start with that, is the value that you can add with IoT and the reason why you do IoT. That is the same, although it's looked at differently maybe today. The background and the concepts are the same. But what has changed is that rather than creating these point-to-point solutions, Evalan has started focusing more on being part of the stack. And with that I mean is, the IoT stack often starts with sensors or devices or machines that need to be connected. Then you have electronic parts or components that enable getting data from those sensors into the cloud. So you have the communication, you have the cloud applications, you have the user interfaces, you have the advanced data processing, and the portion of that stack that brings the data from the field device to the cloud and does that in a secure way, scalable, manageable way to manage a large IoT infrastructure. That's the part that Evalan is focused on. That's been traditionally our strength, and we can deliver value to companies that, for example, have a platform solution, but don't have a good elements to bring the data into their platform.
Really bringing the opportunity to make it connected.
Yes, to make the field device connected to the cloud. Yes, exactly.
All right. And let's go back to the beginning of the podcast. We spoke about COVID and the changes it brought to the world. Has COVID also changed the IoT industry?
Well, it has changed the interest in IoT in certain areas. Two specific examples. One is in healthcare, where you have e-health applications that were around already for quite some years, but were not getting a lot of traction, with maybe some positive exceptions, but in general that is going very slow.
How so? Because of urgency, or why is that?
Well, I think it is mostly because of acceptance by the healthcare world. And it's also often difficult to get you have users, decision makers, and payers. And in healthcare, they are different entities. There's of healthcare. There's a user of healthcare, the patient. There's a decision maker, often a doctor, and there's a payer, and that is usually an insurance company. And aligning those three into the same focus to the same decision is often very difficult in healthcare. Now, what you saw during the Corona crisis was that the same solutions that were already available many years, all of a sudden, became very interested for healthcare professionals, because they realized I can reduce the number of interactions that I need to have with patients. Patients can be treated at home rather than in the hospital, and all of a sudden, this became, it became of interest for the healthcare sector to implement this, and we see this continuing. So it's almost like, there's a discovery of something that was already there for a while, but the value of it was realized, is being realized by the healthcare sector almost because they have to. The other area where you see it is in the real estate sector. Corona actually hardly stopped the building industry. It kept going. Construction, I mean, at least in the Netherlands. And now people are looking at, okay, people need to go back to the office. How can we do that safely? Okay, hey, technology can help. And IoT is part of that technology. So you see a lot more interest in IoT now in, say, smart buildings.
Yes, that's exciting. I'm also really excited for the healthcare solutions that might come around. Okay, so we've talked about the past, the current. Let's go to the future now. Do you dare to make any predictions on the future and IoT?
Well, I think that these trends will continue. That both from a technology point of view, that the cost will continue to come down, the bandwidth will continue to increase, it will become easier and easier to implement IoT. I also think that the belief in what data can do for you will also keep growing. So I think IoT will continue to grow very significantly in the years and maybe decades ahead. I think it will, at some point, everything will be connected to the internet.
More and more. Okay, well, thank you for your knowledge once again, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, Evert.